welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today in the show, we have Benjamin Alouf. He is a pediatrician and he co-wrote the Kevin MD article, How Digital Therapeutics Can Strengthen the Provider-Patient Relationship and Improve Behavioral Health Outcomes. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Can you share your story and journey to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm a board-certified pediatrician. I worked clinically for approximately 15 years in large hospital systems and academic medical centers. And after 15 years of clinical practice, I jumped over and worked in the health side, sort of the other side of healthcare, the payer side. I spent about 10 years there, 9 years there. And then over the last year or so, I couldn't help but open up a pediatric journal talking about the mental health crisis in adolescents and children, increasing anxiety, increasing depression, increasing eating disorders with even more limited and difficulty in accessing care. And I found Limbix Health, a company that was working on prescription digital therapeutics for mental health in adolescents. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get in on the ground floor in something truly innovative and something truly creative and a company that's really trying to solve a problem. And so I joined a little startup from these big hospitals and big health plans. I joined a little startup and it's been wonderful ever since.
So you moved from 15 years of clinical pediatrics onto the payer side and now joining a health startup. Tell me about some of the challenges along the way in making those.
It's a steep learning curve. It's a different mindset. Clearly, being on the clinical side and working with patients, working in a hospital organization, and then going over to the payer side where you're doing a lot of medical necessity reviews is a very different atmosphere. But a lot of regulatory requirements, having to learn about different models of care and models of payment and how they apply to prior authorization and so forth. And then moving to a very small company that's, it was challenging as well because, it's a little bit more technology focused, adapting to different platforms. But the nice thing about it was that you really started to recognize how, when you're in the clinical space, we hear about, for instance, the social media and how technology is actually exacerbating some of the mental health conditions. And what was truly nice is seeing how digital therapeutics and technology can actually help children and help adults. Yeah, so and so some of the challenges are educating providers about that, as well as in terms of bringing these products to market, both from a commercialization standpoint as well as an FDA regulatory standpoint, learning all the regulatory requirements to achieve that.
So we're going to talk about your article shortly, but before we do, you mentioned the term prescription digital therapeutics. So for some background, what exactly is that?
So prescription digital therapeutics are therapies that are cleared by the FDA as being safe and effective to either prevent or treat a very specific disease. So unlike some of the other wellness apps or AI apps or products that are out there that are digital therapeutics, prescription digital therapeutics have to pass very strict regulatory controls. They have to have very specific indications for use. There's a lot of regulatory scrutiny. So you can't just put something out there and offer it. You really have to, in order for you to declare that this is what you're treating and this is what it's effective for, you have to present that with substantial data. And it sets apart those particular therapies because they are FDA reviewed and they are shown to be safe and effective for what they are stating they are going to be treating.
So can you mention some popular examples of prescription digital therapeutics that my audience may have heard of?
So there is Kelly has Endeavor for ADHD. The first one was Pear Reset for substance use disorder. And those were some of the first ones to come out to be reviewed by the FDA to treat specifically substance use disorder and opioid use disorder from Pear. They now have also for alcohol and also Achilles endeavor for ADHD.
Let's talk about the Kevin MD article that you co-wrote. It's titled
Mhm.
How Digital Therapeutics Can Strengthen the Provider-Patient Relationship and Improve Behavioral Health Outcomes. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Sure. So one of the things that, again, you talk about challenges, in terms of commercialization and educating providers about digital therapeutics and prescription digital therapeutics specifically, it's very novel, it's very new. And again, it's such a broad scope of what's already out there and, in terms of telehealth and coaching apps. And I met with Dr. Jardot, who we worked together at a hospital. She's a child psychiatrist. And I wanted to show her SparkRx, and I wanted to demonstrate to her and just get her thoughts and how do we get providers to accept it, to learn about it. And there were several common topics that came up. Number one is, what is a prescription digital therapeutic, as we discussed, but also number two is, how do we integrate this into our care? Historically, technology and digital, digital interfaces in the workspace for providers has been somewhat of a hindrance. It was somewhat of a disruption to the flow of the patient care. And how do you show that these are actually there to support you? It's a lever to pull. It's something you can provide that it's not meant to replace you. It's not meant to replace what you're already doing, but it's meant to complement it. So it's another object for you, another app for you to send the patient home with to continue along the therapy journey. And so, as we talked about it, number one, it's you need to educate what is a prescription digital therapeutics and how different digital therapeutics stand apart. And then number two, how this is meant to help you and how you can integrate it into your clinical care. And one of the things she was also mentioning is, as a pediatric psychiatrist, she has long waiting lists, right? And also discussing how this is a great opportunity for primary care providers to use while they're waiting to get seen by a licensed behavioral health therapist.
Now, can you paint a picture and share a case study of how a prescription digital therapeutic can help in the field of adolescent mental health?
Sure. So right now we know that, we're in a crisis, right? The Surgeon General has come out with a statement, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association came out with a statement that we're in a crisis. Primary care providers are being called upon more and more to be the ones who provide behavioral health services to children, simply because there isn't access, there isn't enough supply of behavioral health therapists. So if a pediatrician sees a child in their office, they do a PHQ, which is a questionnaire to screen for depressive symptoms, which is part of the annual adolescent visit. And they find that the child tests positive in the range of scoring for depression. Currently, waiting times are 3 to 6 months. We hear in some remote areas they're 9 to 12 months. It's just, that's untenable. So they can provide the adolescent with a download through a QR code. They can download it from the App Store. They put in an access code that is unique to the provider, and the child can start using it as a therapy to either continue some therapy with a primary care provider. As I stated, some primary care providers are starting to give some behavioral health therapy, or as they're waiting to be seen by a psychiatrist or psychologist or other behavioral health therapists. And it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy and specifically behavioral activation, which has been shown to be effective in adolescents, and walks them through different levels of engagement. And the active ingredient, so to speak, is that behavioral activation of cognitive behavioral therapy.
So walk us through a little bit more about what the app does. So if I'm an adolescent patient who was prescribed this digital therapeutic app, walk us through exactly what that app does. How often does this patient need to engage with it? What kind of follow-up does this patient need?
Sure. So there is, number one, there's a psychoeducational component. So teaching about depression, teaching about how, there are triggers which lead to certain behaviors, which can then aggravate or exacerbate states of depression, and then moves along the continuum to identify certain activities that are up activities versus down activities. also identify favorite activities, and also identify activities that are based on what values and what value system the teen might have. And then it works with the teen to schedule activities that are either favorite activities or activities that are seen as adding value to the teen, so like spending time with family or spending time with friends, and then has them track their mood before and after doing the activity, and then also make sure that it walks them through it. So it's not just, you like spending time with your family, go spend time with your family. It really walks you through, when are you going to do this? Who are you going to do it with? Who are you going to tell about it? What could possibly go wrong? And then strategies around alternatives. Should the event, you want to go outside for a walk, but it's going to rain. What are some alternatives? And then it checks back with you to see, how did it go? Did it turn out the way you expected it? If not, what were some of the coping mechanisms you used to accommodate those changes? And then it tracks you along, and then you get little rewards. There's a bit of gamification where you get there's a little campground, and you can add things to your campground on one of the screens. And we have a teen advisory council, and they think it's very engaging. The adherence is very strong from the study that we did. And, it really walks them through the important stages of setting up behaviors that then, setting up activities that result in positive mood, through certain behaviors.
Can you talk about some of the data and studies articulating the efficacy of the app?
Yeah, so when we did initially, our study showed that there was a greater than a 5-point reduction in PHQ scores, which is a clinically meaningful reduction. And then we actually presented our poster at the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we won one of the top 3 posters in our group, which was very, very rewarding. It was wonderful to see that people are interested in this and see this as valuable and appreciate the data. And what we found is, in the teenagers that followed through the path, they did it's 5 different levels. Each level has several modules in it. The ones who completed it per protocol had a 21% remission, meaning their PHQ score dropped less than 5, versus 4% in the control app, which for us, the control was a sham app. It was an app that just provided some resources, some psychoeducational information, but didn't have the active ingredient of behavioral activation. 21% versus 4% in the per protocol population for remission. Yeah.
We're talking to Benjamin Alouf. He is a pediatrician, and he co-wrote the Kevin MD article, How Digital Therapeutics Can Strengthen the Provider-Patient Relationship and Improve Behavioral Health Outcomes. Benjamin, what do you see to be on the horizon when it comes to prescription digital apps in the adolescent mental health space?
What I see is providers truly embracing this. In talking to colleagues and reading about what's happening in primary care, especially with telehealth services, with urgent care services, with virtual first services, I get a feeling, and some have expressed this to me directly in person, that the primary care provider is being replaced by alternative therapies that, either real or not, are seen as more convenient than seeing the primary care provider, or more accessible. And what I would like to do is let providers know that it's not all true. A lot of the technology is there to help you. It's there to facilitate you, help you take care of your patient, make it part of your workflow. But it's also very important for providers to be part of that conversation, to get involved. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning, technology and the introduction of electronic health records, they were somewhat disruptive. Providers pushed back a little bit. And we do have the ability now to make this seamless in your care. Certainly never the intention to replace the wonderful care you're already providing, but to help you have something that the patient can go home with, something that you actually can get feedback from. One of the things we're doing is we have a provider portal that actually tells you how the patient is responding to the therapy, how much the patient is engaging with the therapy. And I think of it, when I was practicing, when I wrote a prescription for a patient, I didn't know if they were taking the medication. I didn't know if they were, compliant with it. I didn't know if they were improving or not improving unless I called them or brought them back in for a follow-up. Here, you're actually getting data. You actually are seeing the results right in front of you. You're getting back, how much time was spent on the app, how many levels, how many modules were completed, what subsequent PHQ scores, what those results are, which I think is wonderful. And the other thing is you can actually download these apps for yourself and use them and demo them and see what they do. How often do we prescribe medications to patients and say, oh yeah, this thing is exactly how I was feeling. And this is, we don't take most of the medications we prescribe, yet with these digital therapeutics, you can actually demo them and see what they do and actually, have some understanding of what your patient is experiencing. And that's just, that's mind blowing. It's truly, disruptive in terms of thinking of digital therapeutics as having active ingredients that you can monitor the success of and the therapeutic response to and the compliance with, and also see how it works because you're using it yourself.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I would like to see them trust the technology and also, get involved, go to some of the, they're starting to include more and more digital therapeutic and digital health breakouts in conferences. Go listen to them and provide input. We go to these conferences and we love talking to providers and hearing what they have to say and, getting their feedback, because that's what we're doing it for, right? The end user is the patient, and we're obviously we're treating the patient, but we also want the providers to want to prescribe it. We want the providers to want to use it, to trust it, and to believe in it. So learn about it, participate in it. A lot of these digital companies, they have advisory boards that you can, ask to be on. When you get emails or requests for feedback or follow-up, respond, because they'll listen, because you're the ones that are writing that prescription.
Benjamin, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.